You take a certain kind of pride in your mornings. The house is quiet. The coffee is exactly the way you like it. And you still have your routine. At 70-something, you are still the one managing the house, paying the bills on time, keeping track of the weather, and remembering exactly how you like the yard kept. The neighborhood has changed around you. Neighbors have come and gone, but your rhythm has remained mostly untouched. You are doing well. And honestly, you know it. You have earned the right to run your life exactly the way you see fit. But there is a funny thing about people who handle everything well. People who are used to being the bedrock of their family. When something starts to quietly shift, they are almost always the last ones to admit it. You might feel a sudden, strange heaviness in your chest while carrying a single bag of groceries from the car. And you immediately tell yourself, well, I'm just out of shape. Or you lose your footing for just a fraction of a second on the porch stairs. And you blame the old wood or your worn-out shoes. We all have phrases we use to brush these things off. It's just getting older. We say, I've been doing this for years. I know my body. It sounds comforting. It sounds responsible. Even, but not everything should be filed under age and ignored. Sometimes, the thing that comforts you most, your unwavering confidence in your own independence, is the very thing that keeps you from noticing what is actually happening. Your body is not just aging. In some very specific, very quiet ways, it might be trying to send a flare up into the night sky. And it usually speaks through tiny, ordinary changes that are incredibly easy to miss. Until one day, you cannot ignore them anymore. Let's think about the front yard. For decades, walking down the driveway to check the mail has just been a chore. It is 40 feet of concrete. You know every crack in it. You know exactly where the sprinkler head sticks up too far. One afternoon, you walk down to the box, pull out the catalog and the electric bill, and turn around to walk back up to the house. It is a completely unremarkable Tuesday. The weather is fine. You are not carrying anything heavy. But halfway up the driveway, something happens. You suddenly cannot catch your breath. It is not the feeling of being winded after a long hike. It is a sudden, hollow feeling in your lungs, as if the air has simply thinned out. You stop. You stand there in your own driveway, holding a stack of envelopes, and you have to consciously force yourself to breathe in and out. Maybe there is a faint, tight pressure sitting right behind your ribs, completely out of nowhere. What is the first thing that goes through your mind? If you are like most people who have spent a lifetime taking care of themselves, your brain immediately starts searching for an excuse. You tell yourself it is the humidity. You tell yourself you ate lunch too fast. You convince yourself that you must have been walking faster than usual. Or maybe you just slept wrong last night. You walk into the house, set the mail on the kitchen counter, sit down at the table, and within a few minutes, the feeling passes. Because it passes, you decide it was nothing. You file it away under getting older. But here is what is hiding inside that ordinary moment. The body has an incredible capacity to adapt to slow decline. If you lose a little stamina over 5 years, your body figures out how to mask it. You naturally walk a little slower. You take an extra pause. That is normal aging. But a sudden inability to catch your breath while doing something you do effortlessly every single day, especially when you are not exerting yourself, is not a slow decline. It is a sudden shift in the current. When the heart or the lungs encounter a structural roadblock, they do not always send a sharp, cytomatic pain. Sometimes, they just stop processing oxygen the way they did 24 hours ago. The pressure in the chest, the feeling that you just cannot pull enough air into your body while standing on flat ground, is the body's way of saying that the plumbing is struggling to keep up with the demand. When this happens out of nowhere, it is not a sign that you need to go to the gym more often. It is a signal that a deeper system is asking to be looked at right now, before the workload gets heavier. Yet, we ignore it. We ignore it because acknowledging it feels like stepping over an invisible line. If you call the doctor for every little ache, you think you will never leave the waiting room. Plus, you know exactly what your children will say. If you mention it casually during a Sunday phone call, the tone of their voice will instantly change. They will shift from being your child to sounding like your manager. They will start asking questions. They will suggest coming over. They will want to make an appointment for you. And there is nothing that bristles an independent person more than feeling like they are being managed. When your children suggest you need to get something checked out, what often hurts is not the suggestion itself. It is the underlying implication. It feels like they no longer trust you to take care of yourself. It feels like they are looking at you differently. So, you keep quiet. You say, "I'll know when something is really wrong." But the truth is, the line between fine and not fine is rarely drawn in bold red ink. It is usually drawn in gray. Think about another room in your house. The living room. You have a favorite chair. You have watched 1,000 hours of evening news from that exact spot. You know the exact amount of effort it takes to push yourself up from the armrests. Getting a little lightheaded when you stand up too fast is something you have dealt with for years. You know the drill. You stand up. The blood rushes from your head. You wait 2 seconds. And you go about your business. It is a mechanical quirk of getting older. A slight delay in the body's ability to adjust blood pressure. But one evening, you push yourself up from the chair to go turn off a lamp. And the experience is entirely different. It is not just a head rush. The room actually tilts for a terrifying, silent second. You completely lose your orientation in space. Your feet are on the rug, but your brain does not seem to know where the floor is. You grab the arm of the chair to steady yourself, and your heart hammers against your ribs, not from physical exertion, but from the sudden, visceral shock of losing your balance. You stand there in the quiet living room, bathed in the glow of the television, waiting for the world to right itself. When it finally does, you take a deep breath, walk over to the lamp, turn it off, and go to bed. You do not tell your spouse. You certainly do not tell your kids. You rationalize it. "I'm just tired. I need to drink more water. It's my new blood pressure pill settling in." But a sudden, profound loss of balance, where the room spins, or where your legs briefly forget how to hold your weight, is not the same as standing up too fast. When we are younger, a stumble is just a stumble. But as we age, the neurological pathways that keep us upright, the tiny signals communicating between the inner ear, the eyes, and the brain, run on a very tight schedule. When there is a sudden interruption in that communication, It is rarely just about needing a glass of water. Sometimes, a sudden loss of balance or a severe, unexplained, dizzy spell that comes out of nowhere is the only outward sign of a tiny, temporary disruption of blood flow in the brain. It is the body stuttering for a moment. People often think that if something serious is happening in the brain, it will be accompanied by massive, unmistakable signs. But sometimes, the only sign is that the floor seemed to drop away for 3 seconds on a Tuesday night. The danger is not just what caused the dizziness. The immediate danger is the fall that might happen the next time the floor decides to drop. People fear big, dramatic illnesses. Fewer people notice the quieter, sudden drops in physical stability that slowly set the stage for a life-altering fall. Dismissing a sudden, severe loss of balance as simple clumsiness is a luxury your body can no longer afford. We keep pushing through. We hold onto the wall a little tighter. We take the stairs a little slower. And we tell ourselves that as long as we can still get through the day, everything is fine. We use our past resilience as a shield against our present reality. We look in the mirror and think, I have weathered worse storms than this. I am not going to let a little dizzy spell send me running to a clinic. It is a beautiful kind of stubbornness. It is the exact kind of grit that built your life, raised your family, and got you through the hard decades. But the rules of the game change softly. Grit is wonderful for getting through a difficult job or a tough winter. It is entirely useless against a mechanical change inside your own physiology. You cannot tough your way through a shifting baseline. The house remains quiet. The coffee is still warm in the pot. The mail is on the counter. But the space you are living in feels just a tiny bit less certain than it did the week before. You go to sleep hoping that tomorrow will feel exactly like yesterday. And usually, it does. Until one morning, you notice something else. Something you have lived with for so long that you completely stopped questioning it, suddenly deciding to change its voice. Think about your morning routine again. You get out of the shower, dry off, and reach for the same pair of jeans or trousers you have been wearing for the last 3 years. You pull them up, fasten the button, and pull your belt through the buckle. For years, the metal prong has gone into the exact same worn-out hole in the leather. But lately, the belt feels loose. You pull it an inch tighter and find a new notch. You look in the mirror. Your face looks a little thinner. Your clothes drape a bit differently. If you have spent your whole life battling a few extra pounds, this suddenly feels like a victory. You haven't been going to the gym. You haven't been meticulously counting calories. You are just living your life. And somehow, the weight is finally coming off. You tell yourself that your appetite naturally shrinks as you get older. You only eat half a sandwich for lunch now because you just don't feel like eating the other half. When a friend mentions that you look trim, you smile and say, I guess my metabolism finally figured it out. It is incredibly easy to celebrate this. We are conditioned to believe that losing weight is always a positive thing. But this is where an old, familiar belief can mask a new reality. The human body is an engine. It requires fuel to maintain its mass. If you are not actively trying to change the fuel mixture, if you are not dieting, not exercising more, and not intentionally fasting, yet the engine is suddenly shedding weight. Something profound is happening under the hood. Gradual shifts over a decade are normal. A slowing appetite as activity levels drop is normal. But dropping 10 or 15 pounds in a few months without trying is not a late-in-life fitness triumph. It is the body quietly burning its own reserves. Sometimes, it means the digestive system is no longer absorbing the nutrients you are swallowing. Other times, it means the immune system is working overtime, burning massive amounts of energy to fight a battle you cannot feel yet. Sudden, unexplained weight loss is not a reward. It is a loud question that the body is asking, and you need a doctor to help you translate it. But because the symptom looks like a success, people ignore it for months. They buy smaller pants and keep walking past the warning signs. This kind of misdirection happens all the time in our daily lives. We take a serious signal and wrap it in a harmless, familiar phrase. Let's move out of the house and go to the grocery store. It is a Saturday morning. You have been walking these same aisles for 15 years. You know exactly where the coffee is. You know exactly where the paper towels are kept. You are standing near the dairy case, looking at your handwritten shopping list. You look down at a word you wrote an hour ago. Maybe it says butter. Maybe it says apples. You look at the letters, and for a few terrifying, suspended seconds, the word simply does not make sense. You know it is English, but your brain cannot decode it. Or maybe you walk up to the cashier, a young kid who asks if you found everything okay. You open your mouth to say, "Yes, thank you," but the words refuse to align. You stumble over the syllables. The wrong word slips out, or your tongue suddenly feels heavy and thick. It passes in 10 seconds. You shake your head, laugh a little nervously, and look at the cashier. "Sorry," you say, just having a senior moment. The cashier smiles politely. You swipe your card, take your bags, and walk to your car. You sit behind the wheel, take a deep breath, and tell yourself you just didn't sleep well last night. Senior moment. It is one of the most dangerous phrases we use. It is a protective blanket we throw over anything that scares us about our own minds. We all forget where we put our keys. We all walk into a room and forget why we went in there. That is human. That is distraction. But the mechanics of language, the bridge between recognizing a common word and speaking it, or reading a basic word and understanding its meaning, is a deeply entrenched neural pathway. It is not something you just forget because you are tired. When that specific ability suddenly short-circuits, even for a minute, it is not a normal sign of aging. It is a localized electrical or plumbing issue in the brain. It means that, for a brief moment, the specific area of your brain responsible for language was deprived of what it needed to function. Even if the lights come back on almost immediately, the flicker itself is the warning. Dismissing a sudden, temporary inability to speak or understand language as a mere senior moment is like ignoring a smoke alarm because it only rang for 10 seconds. The fire might still be smoldering in the walls. You don't want to overreact. You don't want to be the person who rushes to the emergency room for a slipped tongue. So, you keep it to yourself. You sit in your living room later that afternoon, turning on the television, hoping to just sink into the comfort of a normal evening. You are watching the evening news. The anchor is talking. The graphics are flashing on the screen. But as you look toward the television, you notice a strange shadow in your vision. It is not the slow, gradual blurring that you are used to. You have worn glasses for decades. You know what a weak prescription looks like. You know what it feels like when your eyes are tired at the end of a long day. But this is different. It feels as if someone has pulled a sheer, gray curtain over one of your eyes. Or perhaps the very center of your vision, right where you are trying to focus, has suddenly become an empty, blurry gray smudge. You blink hard. You take off your glasses, wipe them on your shirt, and put them back on. The smudge is still there. You cover one eye, then the other, and realize the problem is isolated. Again, the rationalization begins. I really need to get my prescription updated. You think, maybe I have a cataract growing. I'll bring it up at my eye doctor appointment next spring. We are incredibly good at finding long-term excuses for sudden problems. We assume that because we are older, any change in our senses is just the inevitable wearing out of the parts. Yes, cataracts develop. Yes, a general vision declines. But those things move at the speed of a glacier. They take years to alter your life. A sudden, painless loss of vision in one eye, or a sudden gray shadow falling over your sight, does not originate in the lens of your eye. It usually originates in the blood vessels feeding the optic nerve, or in the retina itself. The eye is a camera, and a sudden blackout means the cable connecting the camera to the brain has been compromised. Waiting 6 months to mention it to an optometrist is a gamble. When the lights go dim suddenly in one specific room of the house, you don't wait until spring to check the breaker box. Yet, we tolerate these things. We tolerate the blurry spot. We tolerate the stutter. We tolerate the breathlessness. We tolerate them because they are painless, and because they allow us to maintain our dignity and our routine. We believe that if our body is truly in trouble, it will scream in agony. If there is no severe pain, we assume there is no severe danger. But let's look at something even quieter. Let's look down at your feet. You are sitting on the edge of the bed in the morning, putting on your socks. As you pull the fabric over your heel, you notice a small red mark on the bottom of your foot, or maybe a tiny cut near your ankle. You don't remember bumping into anything. You don't remember stepping on anything sharp. It doesn't hurt, so you don't give it a second thought. You put a small adhesive bandage over it and slide your foot into your shoe. 2 weeks go by. You are changing your socks again, and you realize the bandage is still there. You peel it off. The small cut hasn't closed. In fact, the edges look a little angry, a little wider than before. If you are like most people, you sigh, put a fresh bandage on it, and blame your aging skin. My skin is just paper thin now. You say to yourself, things just take longer to heal. And it is true that a 70-year-old body heals slower than a 20-year-old body. But the fundamental mechanism of healing the body's ability to rush blood, oxygen, and repair cells to a damaged area does not stop working unless the delivery system is broken. When a small scratch, blister, or cut on your foot or lower leg refuses to heal for weeks, it is no longer just a skin issue. It is a map of your internal circulation. The feet are the furthest point from the heart. They are the end of the supply line. If the blood flow is getting weak, or if your blood sugar levels have been quietly running too high and damaging the tiny vessels, The evidence often shows up at the very end of the road. A sore that will not heal is the body's way of showing you that it simply does not have the resources to rebuild a quarter-inch of skin. And if it cannot rebuild a quarter-inch of skin on your ankle, it is a sign that the overall environment inside your bloodstream needs professional recalibration. Ignoring it because it doesn't hurt is a dangerous game, because the very reason it doesn't hurt might be that the nerves in your foot are also slowly losing their ability to feel. All of these signs: the loose belt, the scrambled word, the shadow in the eye, the bandage on the foot, share exactly the same trait. They do not force you to the ground. They do not demand an ambulance. They simply sit quietly in the background of your daily life, waiting to see if you are paying attention. They are the quietest conversations your body will ever have with you. The question is, are you willing to listen before the body decides it has to raise its voice? You are paying attention. Of course, you always have. You just happen to be paying attention to the things you have always monitored, while the body has begun communicating on a completely different frequency. Let's step back into the kitchen. You are standing at the sink after lunch, rinsing off a plate. You roll up the sleeves of your flannel shirt to keep the cuffs dry. And as you do, you look down at your forearm. There, spread across the thin skin, is a dark, sprawling purple bruise. It looks angry. It looks like you were struck by a baseball. You pause, holding the wet plate, and try to rewind the last 48 hours in your mind. Did you bump into the edge of the counter? Did you hit your arm on the car door? You cannot remember a single impact. It does not even ache when you press on it. The rationalization is almost automatic. My skin is just getting thin. You tell yourself, I probably bumped the door frame and didn't even notice. You pull your sleeve back down, dry your hands, and go about your afternoon. Thinning skin is a reality of aging. You lose the layer of fat that used to cushion your blood vessels, meaning a minor bump can indeed leave a mark. But a massive, spontaneous bruise that appears out of nowhere, or a sudden pattern of deep bruising across your chest or back, is not about the skin at all. It is about the blood itself. Sometimes, as we age, the intricate chemistry that allows our blood to clot perfectly begins to drift. Perhaps a medication you have taken safely for 5 years is suddenly interacting differently with your liver. Perhaps your platelets are dropping. When your body starts bleeding beneath the surface without provocation, it is a sign that the internal plumbing is springing microscopic leaks. Leaving it unchecked because it doesn't hurt ignores the fact that if the blood is failing to clot just beneath the skin, it might also be struggling to clot in much more important places. And speaking of things we would rather not look at, there is a room in the house where our pride is perhaps the most stubborn. The bathroom. It is morning. You go about your normal routine. But before you flush, you notice something in the bowl that makes your stomach tighten. A dark, terry color, or perhaps a distinct streak of red. The instinct, the immediate, overwhelming human instinct, is to flush the handle as quickly as possible and pretend you saw nothing. You walk out into the hallway and immediately begin building a defense case in your head. I ate beets yesterday. You think, I had a lot of dark berries. Or you fall back on the most common, comforting explanation. It is just an old hemorrhoid. I sit too much. It is nothing to worry about. We do this because the alternative is terrifying. We do this because acknowledging a change in our bodily waste feels like opening a door to the most invasive, uncomfortable medical conversations imaginable. It feels undignified, but the digestive tract is a closed system. It is a long, sealed corridor. When dark, digested blood or fresh red signals appear in that corridor, it means a window has been broken somewhere inside. Yes, it could be something as simple and harmless as a minor irritation, but it can also be the very first, entirely painless whisper of an ulcer, an inflammation, or something growing where it shouldn't be. The tragic thing about changes in the bathroom is that they are often the most curable issues if they are caught the very first week you notice them. But because of embarrassment, because of pride, people wait. They wait for it to happen a second time, then a third. They wait until the quiet whisper becomes a loud crisis. You have spent your whole life protecting your dignity. Do not let dignity be the thing that keeps you from making a phone call. Sometimes, though, the warning is not visual. Sometimes, it is purely a sensation, and it is impossible to hide. You are sitting on the back porch, reading a magazine. It is a quiet afternoon. Out of nowhere, without any warning, an explosion of pain strikes the inside of your head. It is not the dull, familiar ache of a tension headache. It is not the throbbing of a sinus infection. It feels like a physical strike, a sudden, blinding intensity that makes you drop the magazine and press the heels of your hands against your temples. People who get migraines know their own patterns. But if you are over 70 and you are suddenly hit with what doctors sometimes call a thunderclap, a headache that reaches its maximum, unbearable intensity, within 60 seconds, your brain is not asking for an aspirin. We try to endure pain because we were taught to be tough. You might think, I will just go lay down in a dark room. It will pass. But a sudden, unprecedented, explosive pain in the head is the body's loudest alarm bell. It is often the sensation of a sudden change in blood pressure within the brain itself, or a vessel that has suddenly bulged or leaked. Lying down and hoping it goes away is exactly the wrong move. In moments like that, toughness is not a virtue, speed is. Calling for help immediately is the only rational choice. Yet, for all these physical signs, the breath, the balance, the bruises, the sharp pains, there is one final sign that is the quietest of all. It is so quiet that you might not even be the one to notice it. Let's look out at the garage. You have a workbench out there. For 10 years, you have spent your weekends tinkering, fixing radios, building birdhouses, or just organizing your tools. It was your sanctuary, or maybe it was your garden, where you knew the name of every bulb you planted. But over the last 2 months, you just haven't gone out there. You tell yourself you are just taking a break. You tell your spouse, I'm just not in the mood lately. I'm tired. The weather is too damp. You spend more time in your chair. You stop calling your friends to catch up. When the grandkids come over, you smile, but you feel a strange, flat emptiness behind the smile. The joy feels muffled, as if you are watching your own life through a thick pane of glass. Your children might notice. They might say, Dad, you haven't been to the wood shop in weeks. Or, Mom, you didn't even plant the tomatoes this year. And you brush them off. You assume that as you get older, Your world is just supposed to shrink. You assume that apathy is just a natural side effect of having lived a long time. But sudden, profound apathy, a complete loss of interest in the things that used to anchor your days, is not a character flaw. It is not just getting old. While we often think of depression as profound sadness, in older adults, it frequently disguises itself as an absolute lack of energy and interest. And here is the piece of invisible knowledge that changes everything. This apathy is not always just psychological. Sometimes, a heart that is not pumping efficiently fails to send enough oxygenated blood to the brain. Sometimes, tiny, unnoticed changes in the brain's circulation drain the chemical reservoirs that create motivation. You might not be lazy. You might not be giving up. Your hardware might simply be running on a low-power mode because of an undiagnosed physical condition. When you mention this profound tiredness to a doctor, they don't just look at your mood, they look at your blood, your thyroid, your heart rate. Apathy is a physical symptom. You do not have to accept a shrinking, gray world just because your hair is gray. Look back at your morning. The house is still quiet. The coffee is still warm. You are still the one managing the bills, watching the weather, and deciding how the day will go. For your entire adult life, you have believed that going to the doctor means handing over your autonomy. You sit in a paper gown in a cold room, waiting for someone younger than you to tell you what to do. It feels like a surrender. It feels like admitting that your body is no longer your own. But think about it differently. Think about the car you have driven for 10 years. If the engine started making a quiet, persistent ticking noise, you would not ignore it until the transmission fell out on the highway. You would take it to a mechanic, not because you are giving up the car, but because you want to keep driving it. Your body is speaking to you. The shortness of breath on the driveway, the tilting floor in the living room, the belt that needs a new notch, the word that suddenly vanished from your tongue, the shadow in your eye, the bruise on your arm, the empty workbench in the garage. These are not defeats. They are data. Calling your doctor to say, "Something feels slightly off, and I want to look under the hood," is not an admission of weakness. It is the ultimate assertion of control. It is you deciding that you want to keep living in this house, drinking this coffee, and managing this yard on your own terms for as long as possible. You do not have to wait for an emergency to deserve care. You do not have to be in unbearable pain to justify a phone call. The most independent people in the world are not the ones who silently endure a shifting foundation. They are the ones who notice the tiny cracks, pick up the phone, and quietly fix the mortar before the storm arrives. You have earned the right to run your life. Now, you just need to protect the machinery that makes it all possible.